Between Ashes and Dawns. Synopsis. Andalusia, 1895. The olive groves of La Arboleda stretch as far as the eye can see, a symbol of power and wealth for the Montemayor family. But for the peasants they mean toil, hunger, and blind obedience. Elena Montoro, the daughter of laborers, refuses to accept that fate. The day her father is murdered after a clash with the overseers, she swears she will not rest until she unmasks those responsible. With wit and courage, she manages to infiltrate the estate as governess to the youngest children. There she discovers a world of luxury and forbidden secrets. A marchioness consumed by jealousy and resentment. An heir marked by a shadowed past. And an impossible love with Gabriel, the eldest son, that will endanger both her vow of justice and her own heart. Amid conspiracies, passions, and truths hidden beneath the shadow of the olive trees, Elena will learn that her struggle is not only for vengeance, but for discovering who she truly is. Welcome to Whispers by Maga Audiobooks. I invite you to listen to this intense and moving story. Make yourselves comfortable, because the journey is about to begin. Chapter 1, The Land and the Blood. The Andalusian sun fell like fire over the olive groves. The air was heavy with dust and with the bitter scent released by freshly beaten olives. Elena Montoro moved between the furrows, her skirt hitched up, her hands hardened by work. She had not yet reached 20, but life in the fields had stolen her innocence long before. Her dark, steady eyes were not those of a resigned peasant. They belonged to someone who dreamed of another life, even knowing dreams came at a high cost. Her father, Julian, gathered dry branches beside her. He was a weathered man with broad shoulders, one who spoke little but observed much. That afternoon, however, his words fell like an omen. "One day, daughter, this land will take more from us than it gives." Quote. Elena did not answer. She knew her father's anger was aimed at the Montemayor family, owners of the estate that ruled over the valley. Men in fine suits and polished boots who knew nothing of bleeding for a harvest. The sound of hooves broke into her thoughts. 3 riders were approaching along the dusty path. They were overseers from the estate, with wide-brimmed hats and carbines strapped across their backs. "Julian," said the one in front, a man with a twisted mustache, "the master is tired of your protests. Today your tongue is silenced." Quote. Elena felt the air freeze in her chest. Her father stepped forward, tall and unyielding like an oak. "I am not afraid to speak," he replied in a deep voice. "And even less to die for telling the truth." Quote. The strike was so swift she barely saw it coming. One of the riders dismounted and drove a machete into her father's side. Elena's scream tore through the air, echoing among the olive trees. Julian fell to his knees, his shirt drenched in red. The men laughed as they rode away, leaving behind the smell of leather and iron. Elena dropped beside him, her trembling hands trying to stop the relentless blood. "Father, please, hold on." Julian's eyes searched for hers one last time. "Do not weep, daughter, fight. Make sure my death is not in vain." Quote. And with a sigh carried off by the wind, his life slipped away between her fingers. Elena remained alone, kneeling on earth stained with blood. The silence of the fields was unbearable. In that moment, she swore she would not yield. That she would step into the lair of the Montemayor even if it meant changing her face, her name, and her destiny. Beneath the shadow of the olive trees, a promise of love and vengeance had just been born. Chapter 2, The Deception. Elena had cried until no tears were left, but pain soon turned into a single certainty. Avenging her father was the only way to go on living. She could not face the Montemayor with a weapon nor with the brute strength of the laborers. She had to do it from within, like a silent poison. The following weeks she spent in secret, searching for a way to enter the estate. That was when she heard the rumor: the Marchioness Montemayor urgently needed a governess for the youngest children. The last one had fled in the middle of the night, unable to endure the lady's whims or the house's iron rules. Elena knew how to read and write, something rare among the girls of the countryside. Her mother had taught her in secret, convinced that knowledge was the only inheritance she could leave her. That secret, which Elena had always guarded like a precious treasure, now became her salvation. With the help of Doña Rosario, an elderly midwife from the village who loved her like a granddaughter, Elena obtained forged letters of recommendation. The parchment still smelled of fresh ink, but the steady, elegant handwriting could convince anyone it was genuine. Doña Rosario stroked her hair with tenderness. "Your mother would be proud of you." Quote. Elena lowered her head, a knot rising in her throat. It had been 3 winters since illness had taken her away, and since then she and her father had struggled alone in the fields. That absence followed her like an open wound, a silent shadow that now drove her even more to fight. "Child, this is a dangerous game," warned Doña Rosario as she handed her the envelope. "If they discover who you are, you'll have nowhere to hide." Quote. Elena held the paper between her fingers and lifted her gaze, determined. "I have nothing left to lose." Quote. At dawn she appeared before the black gates of La Arboleda, the most powerful estate in the region. The whitewashed walls gleamed beneath the sun, and the gardens looked more like a palace than an agricultural hacienda. A guard with a thick mustache stopped her. "Who are you and what do you want?" "Elena de la Fuente," she answered without hesitation, using the false surname she had chosen. "I've come for the governess position." Quote. The guard looked her up and down, suspicious, but let her pass after checking the letters. As she crossed the central courtyard, Elena's heart pounded like a drum. Each step carried her further from the life she had known and closer to the heart of the enemy. In the main gallery, lined with blue tiles and marble columns, the Marchioness Montemayor awaited her. She was a woman of haughty bearing, dressed in strict black, fanning herself slowly. Her pale eyes dissected Elena as if they were blades. "So you are Miss de la Fuente," she said with a cold voice. "You do not appear to have the elegance of a governess, but your handwriting is impeccable." Quote. Elena bowed her head, steadying the tremor in her hands. "I am discreet, obedient, and hard-working." Quote. The Marchioness studied her a moment longer, then nodded. "We shall see if you are as capable as you claim. In this house, miss, loyalty is everything." Quote. Elena smiled with humility, but inside burned a different flame. Her loyalty was not to the Montemayor family, but to the memory of her father. That day, beneath the high ceilings of the estate, her double life began. A peasant disguised as a governess, walking a dangerous edge where every lie could cost her life, or her heart. Chapter 3, The Entrance to La Arboleda. La Arboleda was not a simple estate, it seemed a kingdom within the kingdom. Sunlight filtered through the tiled courtyards where marble fountains sang with crystal water, while servants hurried about with quick steps and lowered heads. The whitewashed walls shone like mirrors, and the olive groves stretched farther than the eye could see, a silent green sea. Elena walked the corridors with her head held high, though inside a knot tightened in her stomach. She had never seen so much wealth gathered in one place: tapestries brought from Seville, crystal chandeliers, furniture carved with the precision of a goldsmith. Everything stood in stark contrast to the clay and wood simplicity of her home in the countryside. The Marchioness introduced her to the children, 2 restless little ones who looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and shyness. Elena smiled at them with tenderness, aware that through them she would manage to remain under that roof without raising suspicion. "From now on, Miss de la Fuente, your duty is to educate them, watch over them, and keep them out of trouble," ordered the Marchioness, snapping her fan shut. Elena bowed her head, hiding the determination in her eyes. "I will do all that I can, my lady." Quote. The Marchioness walked away with firm steps, and at last Elena drew a deep breath, feeling for the first time that she was alone. That afternoon she taught the children to read simple words. She showed them how to trace letters on a slate and patiently praised every success. From the gallery, someone was watching. Gabriel Montemayor, arms crossed and expression stern, seemed distracted as he looked at a family portrait, but in truth his eyes never left the governess. It was unusual for his siblings to remain attentive for so long, let alone to repeat each word with enthusiasm. "Curious," he said at last, breaking the silence. "I have never seen them so disciplined." Quote. Elena looked up, startled. "It is not discipline, Señor Montemayor." It is patience, something that is sometimes lacking in this house. Quote. He arched a brow, as though he had not expected such a reply. He said nothing more, but observed her a moment longer before leaving. Elena felt that exchange, so brief, had left in the air a dangerous spark. She was not mistaken. You do not seem like a governess, said a deep voice from the gallery. Elena turned and saw him. Gabriel Montemayor, the eldest son. Tall, with a sure bearing, his dark hair tousled by the wind, and a light jacket that could not disguise the air of command he carried within him. His eyes, intense and piercing, seemed to strip her bare in a single glance. Elena held his gaze, though her heart was pounding hard. And you do not seem like a gentleman ready to greet a stranger with courtesy. Quote. Her answer caught Gabriel by surprise. A faint, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. You have spirit, too much for anyone under this roof. Quote. Spirit is not a flaw, Elena replied calmly. The silence between them grew taut, as if the air had become too narrow for the two of them. Gabriel studied her a moment longer, then inclined his head slightly. Be careful, Miss de la Fuente. La Arboleda is no place for those who have something to hide. Quote. And he walked away with steady steps, leaving her with a strange heat in her cheeks and an unsettling certainty. That man could become as much her danger as her downfall. That night, as she arranged her few belongings in the small room she had been given, Elena thought of Gabriel's gaze. The encounter had been brief, yet the feeling still burned in her chest. She had not come to La Arboleda in search of love. She had come in search of justice. And yet, the seed of something more had just been planted beneath the shadow of those walls. Chapter 4, The Eldest Son. The first week at La Arboleda passed like a silent test. Elena carried out every duty with discipline, teaching the children, keeping her composure, appearing obedient. But she knew that every glance from the marchioness was a sharp blade, waiting for the smallest slip to pierce her skin. That afternoon, while she was teaching the little ones in the library, the sound of heavy boots echoed down the hallway. The door burst open, and there he was, Gabriel Montemayor. The children ran to their elder brother with laughter of relief. He embraced them warmly, but his eyes quickly settled on Elena. Have you already won their trust? He asked with irony. Elena kept her calm. I am here to educate them, not to win anyone over. Quote. Gabriel circled her slowly, like a predator sizing up its prey. I have seen many governesses pass through this house. They all arrived with smiles and good intentions. None of them lasted more than a month. Quote. Elena pressed her lips together, refusing to lower her gaze. Perhaps none of them had the necessary resolve. Quote. He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the warmth of his breath. Or perhaps none of them hid something as well as you do. Quote. Elena's heart jolted, but she did not let her voice tremble. What are you implying, Señor Montemayor? Gabriel held her gaze for what felt like an eternity. His eyes were embers threatening to consume her. At last he stepped back with a gesture of disdain. Nothing that time won't eventually reveal. Quote. The children, oblivious to the tension, begged their brother to stay. Gabriel soothed them and left the room. Elena watched him go, her chest a whirlwind of fear, anger, and an attraction she refused to acknowledge. That night, unable to sleep, she leaned out the window of her small room. The moon bathed the olive groves in a silver glow. And there, in the courtyard, she saw Gabriel's silhouette training with a sword, his figure etched against the light. Each movement was firm, precise, as if he were battling invisible enemies. Elena could not look away. She had sworn to avenge her father, had promised not to be swayed by anything or anyone in that house. But something in Gabriel Montemayor drew her with the same force as danger itself. And within her she understood, terrified, that the true challenge of her plan would not be deceiving the marchioness, nor uncovering the family's secrets. It would be resisting the fire burning in the eyes of the eldest son. Chapter 5, Secrets Within Walls. La Arboleda slept under a restless silence. The servants had withdrawn, the children were resting in their rooms, and the marchioness remained in her private parlor, surrounded by shadows and secrets. Elena, however, could not fall asleep. Something in that house felt suffocating, as if the walls kept buried voices. She decided to walk through the dim corridors, carrying a small lamp that barely lit her steps. As she passed the office of the late patriarch Montemayor, closed for years, or so she had heard, she noticed the door stood slightly ajar. A cold draft prickled her skin. She pushed it gently and stepped inside. The place was covered in dust, but on the desk lay recent papers. Elena leaned closer to look, a list of dismissed laborers, among them the name of her father, Elena Montoro. Beside it, a note written in firm handwriting, necessary example. Quote. Elena's heart lurched. Those words were proof that her father's death had not been an accident, nor the outburst of enraged overseers, it had been an order. A punishment. The creak of wood behind her made her turn. In the doorway, jacket unbuttoned and hair tousled, stood Gabriel Montemayor. Is it your habit to snoop in other people's houses? He asked in a low, dangerous voice. Elena felt her blood turn to ice, but she held his gaze. I got lost, it was not my intention to come in here. Quote. Gabriel closed the door behind him slowly, like someone trapping another inside a cage. Do not lie. Your eyes are not those of a woman lost, but of a woman searching for something. Quote. Elena stepped back until she collided with the desk. Gabriel advanced until he stood before her. The silence was so intense that the beating of their hearts could be heard. I do not know what sort of game you are playing, Miss de la Fuente, he murmured, but I will warn you of this. La Arboleda devours those who think they can deceive it. Quote. Elena wanted to answer firmly, yet Gabriel's closeness disarmed her. His breath, warm and near, enveloped her. For an instant she feared he might hear the truth roaring inside her chest, that she had come there driven by vengeance, and that her greatest danger was not the Montemayor family, but the impossible attraction pulling her toward him. Gabriel's eyes locked onto hers, as though he meant to decipher her. You have secrets, he whispered. Elena held her breath. And so do you. Quote. For an instant, the world seemed to stop. Then, without another word, Gabriel stepped back. He turned toward the door, but before leaving he gave one last warning. I advise you to be careful, because I am watching you too. Quote. Elena was left alone, the document in her hands and her heart racing wildly. She had uncovered a clue about her father's death, but at the same time, she had found a far greater danger. Gabriel not only watched her, he drew her like a flame that could consume her entirely. Chapter 6, Beneath the Olive Trees. Night had fallen over La Arboleda with a heavy silence. Only the murmur of crickets and the distant howl of a dog broke the calm. Elena slipped out into the fields with the excuse of needing fresh air, though in truth she longed to escape the pressure of those walls that seemed to watch her without rest. The olive groves stretched like a forest of silver shadows beneath the moon. Elena walked among the trees until she reached a clearing where the wind gently stirred the branches. There she stopped, letting the cold air clear the storm inside her mind. This is not a safe place for a lady, said a voice behind her. Elena turned in alarm. From the shadows emerged Gabriel Montemayor, his jacket open, his gaze lit by a fire that sent a shiver through her. Do you follow me now, Señor Montemayor? She asked, caught between defiance and unease. He advanced slowly, like a wolf closing the distance with its prey. I do not make a habit of following anyone, but somehow I always find you where you should not be. Quote. Elena drew a deep breath, refusing to give in. Perhaps the problem is that you appear everywhere. Quote. Gabriel allowed a faint, dangerous smile. He stopped before her, close enough for her to feel the heat of his body. Tell me, Miss de la Fuente, what is it you seek in this house? Is it money, protection, or perhaps, something more? Elena held his gaze though the ground seemed to tremble beneath her feet. I seek only to fulfill my duty, she replied firmly. Nothing more. Quote. Gabriel tilted his head, as if he did not believe a word. No, his voice was a deep whisper. You are searching for answers. I see it in your eyes. And I know you are hiding something, just as I am. Quote. Elena tried to reply, but he stepped closer, closing the space until their faces were a breath apart. The silence of the olive trees wrapped around them, as though the earth itself were holding its breath. For a fleeting moment, Elena felt the world disappear. No vengeance, no fear, no lies, only the impossible pull of a man who embodied everything she ought to despise. Gabriel lifted a hand and brushed aside a strand of her hair with gentle fingers. The touch was brief, but it burned like fire. If you play with fire, señorita, he murmured, you will end up burned. Quote. Elena stepped back, forcing herself to break the spell. I would rather burn than live in shadows, she answered, with a voice that hardly seemed her own. Gabriel watched her intently, as if he wanted to say more, but restrained himself. At last he stepped away, leaving behind an unbearable emptiness. I do not know who you truly are, Elena, he said, speaking her name for the first time, but discovering it will be my priority. Quote. And he disappeared among the olive trees, leaving her alone beneath the moon. Elena pressed a hand to her chest, where her heart pounded violently. She had come there seeking air, and what she had found was a fire that threatened to consume her whole. Chapter 7, The Marquesa's Suspicion. The Marquesa Montemayor had always possessed a feline instinct for detecting lies. She could scent fear in a servant, unmask falseness in a smile, and disarm anyone with a single glance. And since the governess had set foot in La Arboleda, something about her had never quite fit. That morning, while Elena gave reading lessons to the children in the gallery, the Marquesa watched from her wicker chair, pretending to distract herself with her fan. Every gesture of the young woman intrigued her, the firmness in her voice, the way she met one's eyes directly, too proud for someone who claimed to come from a modest family. Señorita de la Fuente, she interrupted suddenly, where did you say you were from? Elena lifted her gaze, a chill running down her spine. From Córdoba, señora. My father was a teacher, and my mother, a seamstress. Quote. The Marquesa tilted her head, studying her with a cold smile. How strange, I have never heard of a teacher with that surname. Quote. Elena's hands tightened on the book, but her tone remained calm. My family was not well known, señora. Just simple people. Quote. The fan snapped shut. We shall see. Quote. That very afternoon, while the children napped, Elena slipped into the courtyard for air. As she crossed the silent corridors, she saw him, Gabriel, watching her from the far end, with that blend of defiance and desire that set her blood racing. They exchanged no words, only a look. A look that said everything, and one that did not go unnoticed. From the balcony on the second floor, the Marquesa observed them with narrowed eyes. She needed no proof to know. Something burned between her son and the governess. Something that could turn into scandal if she did not cut it at the root. Later, she summoned Elena to her chambers. The young woman entered a room perfumed with incense, its heavy curtains allowing only a thin thread of light to filter through. Listen carefully, señorita, said the Marquesa in a low voice, firm as a whip. I do not know what it is you seek in this house, but I warn you, one does not play games with the Montemayors. Least of all with my son. Quote. Elena held her gaze, though a cold shiver ran through her. I do not understand what you mean, señora. Quote. The Marquesa's smile held no joy. Of course you understand. And if you insist on denying it, I will make you understand, by force, if I must. Quote. Elena left that room with her heart constricted. She knew her disguise was beginning to crack. And the worst part was not the Marquesa's suspicion, but the truth that, deep in her soul, she no longer wished to deny what she felt for Gabriel. Chapter 8, Feasts and Masks. The death of Don Rodrigo Montemayor was still a fresh whisper in the region. Only a few weeks had passed since the patriarch had been laid to rest beneath the family cypresses, and the townsfolk murmured at the strangeness of what was about to happen, a celebration held in a house still in mourning. But the Marquesa had been firm. The harvest ball would be celebrated as it was every year, for La Arboleda had to show that it remained strong, untouchable. To cancel it would be to admit weakness. Thus, that night the estate transformed into a stage of lights. Servants lit dozens of candelabra, musicians tuned their violins, and the ladies of the nobility, though whispering quietly about the audacity of their hostess, arrived adorned in their finest gowns. Elena had been ordered to watch over the children, but a maid had lent her a simple ivory dress. When she descended into the hall, many mistook her for a guest. And then she saw him, Gabriel Montemayor, clad in black, elegant, carrying the weight of his inheritance on his shoulders and the fire of something indecipherable in his eyes. His gaze sought her through the crowd, ignoring the ladies who courted him with smiles. As the orchestra began its melody, Gabriel crossed the hall and, heedless of the stares, extended his hand. "Señorita de la Fuente, may I have this dance?" Elena hesitated. She knew the Marquesa was watching from her velvet throne, fan poised like a weapon. But she accepted. They danced as though the entire hall had vanished. Their steps were precise, their breaths brushed against one another, and in every turn there was an unspoken confession neither dared voice. "I should not be here with you," Elena murmured. "And yet, here you are," Gabriel replied. When the music ended, he leaned close and whispered into her ear. "One day, you will tell me who you truly are. And on that day, nothing will ever be the same." Quote. Elena trembled. She had crossed a dangerous boundary, and she knew it. So did the Marquesa. Chapter 9, The Price of Truth. At dawn, the echo of music still lingered in the walls. Yet Elena could not stop thinking of Gabriel's nearness during the dance, of the warmth of his hand against hers. And of how reckless she had been to let herself be swept away. That morning, while arranging some shelves in the library, a bundle of papers slipped to the floor. Among them lay a yellowed envelope, forgotten. The seal still bore the Montemayor crest. She opened it. The handwriting was firm, cruel, unmistakable, Don Rodrigo Montemayor. "The laborer Julian Montoro has become a problem. His voice sows discord among the workers. It is necessary to make an example of him. The obedience of the rest depends on his sacrifice." Quote. Elena felt her heart shatter. The man who had ordered her father's death was the master of this house, and he had even put it in writing, as though a man's death was not worth concealing. Don Rodrigo, obsessed with recording everything, had archived even his darkest commands. Tears burned in her eyes. That letter was the proof. "What are you doing with those papers?" Gabriel's voice cut through her. Elena spun around, startled. He stood at the threshold, his gaze fixed on the envelope she clutched to her chest. "Here is the truth," she cried, her sobs restrained. "Your father ordered my father's death." Quote. Gabriel paled. He stepped toward her. "Your father was Julian Montoro?" Elena nodded, fury and grief in her eyes. "Yes. And now I know he was condemned by Don Rodrigo's will." Quote. The silence that followed was unbearable. Gabriel lowered his head, as though a heavy stone had crushed him. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Quote. He sank into a chair, his face shadowed. "While my father ruled this estate with an iron hand, I was studying in Seville. I grew up hearing that the laborers were ungrateful, that their rebellion only brought misery. He never showed me his darkest dealings, and I, naive, preferred not to ask." Quote. He raised his gaze to her, anguish blazing in his eyes. "I did not know, Elena. Not until now." Quote. "But you bear his name," Elena replied, her voice breaking. "And that name stole my father from me." Quote. Gabriel looked at her with fierce pain. "I am not him, Elena. And I will not let you condemn me as though I were." Quote. Tension closed in on them, closer than ever to an impossible abyss. Elena trembled. She hated his name, yet she could not deny what she felt for him. And then the door burst open. The Marquesa appeared, rigid, her eyes like blades. "What an interesting scene," she said, fan snapped shut in her hand. "My son and the governess, alone, in the library." Quote. Elena hid the letter behind her skirts. Gabriel stepped forward, placing himself between them. "Enough, mother." Quote. But the Marchesa's gaze said it all, she had seen enough to ignite a war. In that instant, Elena knew her secret, her plan for vengeance, and the fire that pulled her toward Gabriel were about to collide in a storm of irreversible consequences. Chapter 10, A Decision at Dawn. Elena had not slept. The letter burned in her hands like a flame impossible to extinguish. It was the proof she had dreamed of finding, a document bearing Don Rodrigo Montemayor's signature, ordering the death of her father. But the truth weighed far heavier than she had imagined. She sat by the window of her chamber, watching the dawn paint the olive groves gold. The rooster's crow carried her back to childhood, to Julian's laughter between the furrows, to the scent of damp earth. And now that memory mingled with another, Gabriel's arms, steady as they held her during the dance. Elena clenched her teeth. What kind of monster was she, to feel drawn to the son of those who had destroyed her life? But worse still was the knowledge deep within her soul, Gabriel was not her enemy. And that certainty tore her apart. A knock at the door startled her. It was him. Gabriel entered without waiting for permission. He looked worn, with the hollow eyes of a man who had not slept either. Closing the door behind him, he fixed her with a gaze of anger, grief, and something else that left her defenseless. "I need the truth," he said, his voice grave. "That letter, do you have it?" Elena hesitated, then drew out the envelope. She held it in her hands, unwilling to surrender it. "Here it is. The order that killed my father. Signed by Don Rodrigo." Quote. Gabriel took it carefully, as though it burned. He read it, and his face hardened. "My God," he murmured. "It's true." Quote. A thick silence fell. Then Gabriel lifted his gaze to her. "Elena, listen to me. I am not my father. I cannot undo what he did, but I can bring justice. Let me prove to you that not all Montemayors are the same." Quote. Elena trembled. She wanted to hate him, yet the intensity in his eyes unraveled her. "And what justice can you give me?" she asked, her voice breaking. He stepped closer. "If I must, I'll bring this estate to its knees to clear his name. But do not hate me for what another has done." Quote. Tears blurred Elena's sight. The ground seemed to vanish beneath her feet. And in that instant, Gabriel took her hand with a tenderness that contrasted with the force of his words. "Do not lie to me anymore. From the moment you arrived, I've known there was something between us." Quote. Elena pulled her hand away sharply, though her voice was barely a whisper. "What lies between us is impossible." Quote. "Then let me make it possible," he replied, stepping so close that his breath mingled with hers. "Even if it means defying my mother." Quote. Elena's heart pounded violently. For an instant she was on the verge of yielding, of letting herself be swept away by what she felt. But then she remembered her father's grave, the tears of her childhood, the vow of vengeance. She tore herself away. "No. I can't." Quote. Gabriel froze, pain etched across his face. He nodded silently and left, closing the door with a sharp thud. Elena sank into the chair, the letter still in her hands. The dawn flooded the room with light, yet inside her chest the darkness was unbearable. She knew she had to choose. To wield the letter as a weapon against the Montemayors. Or surrender to the love of a man who bore their name. The fate of them both hung upon that choice. Chapter 11, The Shadow of the Marchesa. The Marchesa Montemayor had never trusted the governess. Her intuition, sharpened by a lifetime of intrigues, told her the young woman was hiding more than she showed. And after what she had witnessed in the library, her son and Elena far too close, their gazes betraying a nervousness they could not conceal, she decided the time had come to act. She summoned one of her most loyal maids, Rosora, and gave her a clear order: follow the governess discreetly. Every step, every gesture. Nothing is hidden from me in my own house, she warned in a low, chilling voice. That very afternoon, Elena went into the garden with a book in her hands. Hidden inside the book was Don Rodrigo's letter. Her heart would not stop pounding, it was too dangerous to keep it in her chamber, yet she could not bring herself to destroy it. That letter was her only weapon, her shield, and her curse at the same time. From the gallery, Rosora observed her. Though she could not make out what was concealed between the pages, she noticed the nervous way Elena pressed the volume to her chest. That night, the maid rushed to tell the Marquesa everything. "Señora, she hides something. She carries it with her everywhere, as if it were a treasure." Quote. The Marquesa narrowed her eyes. "I knew it. There is something she does not want us to see. And I will discover it." Quote. Meanwhile, Gabriel was searching for Elena. He found her in the stables, amid the smell of hay and horses, far from the indiscreet ears of the house. "Do not let my mother intimidate you," he said gravely. "She will stop at nothing to separate us, but I will not allow it." Quote. Elena looked at him with sorrow. "It is not only your mother, Gabriel. It is the past that divides us. The letter I found is not a mere paper, it is a death sentence against my father." Quote. He stepped closer and took her by the shoulders. "Then let us fight together. Let me bear that weight, even if it is the weight of my own name." Quote. Elena felt her defenses crumble. For a fleeting moment, her forehead rested against Gabriel's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. The world seemed to stop. But a shadow shifted at the entrance of the stable. It was no horse, nor a servant. It was Rosora, watching in silence, her eyes wide. She slipped away before she could be discovered, running straight to the Marquesa. And that very night, the mistress of La Arboleda learned the truth: the governess was hiding a secret capable of toppling her family. In her chamber, the Marquesa snapped her fan shut with a sharp crack. "So, you hold a weapon against us, little girl," she whispered with a frozen smile. "We shall see how long before you regret keeping it." Quote. Chapter 12, The Duel in the Gallery. The gallery of La Arboleda lay in shadow, lit only by the glow of candelabras. The silence of the night was so thick that any sound seemed like a cry. Elena walked briskly, her heart racing, the letter hidden within the pages of a missal she pretended to read. She knew the Marquesa would discover something sooner or later, but she had not imagined the confrontation would come so soon. Turning under an arch, she saw her. The Marquesa was waiting, upright, the closed fan in her hand held like a scepter. Her eyes, cold as blades, needed no words to make Elena feel trapped. "Señorita de la Fuente," she pronounced slowly, in a tone almost cordial, and far more threatening than a shout. "Do you know the difference between women like you and women like me?" Elena stopped, without answering. The Marquesa advanced, her slow steps echoing against the tiles. "I was born to command. And you were born to obey." Quote. Elena clutched the book to her chest. "I obey only my conscience, Señora." Quote. The Marquesa's smile was icy. "Do not play games with me. I know you are hiding something. A secret, a paper. And let me warn you, nothing that belongs to this house may remain in the hands of an intruder." Quote. Elena felt her pulse hammering at her temples. "That paper proves the truth," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "It proves that your husband ordered my father's murder." Quote. The Marquesa froze. The silence was absolute. Only the crackle of a candle broke the tension. Suddenly, the Marquesa let out a short, bitter laugh. "So the mask comes off at last. Daughter of Julian Montoro, I suspected as much." Quote. Elena drew a deep breath. "You cannot deny it now. Don Rodrigo's signature is there." Quote. The Marquesa studied her like a hawk. "And what do you think you will achieve with that paper? Revenge? Justice? No one in this land would dare raise their voice against the Montemayor name. That letter is nothing but ink on yellowed paper." Quote. Elena stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Perhaps. But it will be enough to show it to the people for the truth to come to light." Quote. The Marquesa lifted her chin, her smile glacial. "Then know this, little girl, if that letter sees the light of day, it will not be my name alone that is destroyed. My sons will fall with it. And with him, his future. Are you willing to drag him down in your fall?" Elena trembled. The blow had struck home. "Gabriel?" The Marquesa leaned close, murmuring softly. "Hate me all you wish. But do not drag my son into your vengeance." or you will regret it. Quote. With an elegant turn, she walked away, the fan tapping against her palm. Elena remained alone, the missile pressed tight in her hands, the letter hidden within. She knew the battle had begun. The Marchesa would not rest until she had stolen that proof. And now, Elena's heart was torn between justice for her father and the impossible love she bore for Gabriel, the man trapped between two women waging a silent war. Chapter 13, Between Blood and Desire. The Marchesa awaited him beneath the portrait of Don Rodrigo, the figure of the late patriarch casting silence over the grand hall. Son, she began, her voice soft but venomous. I know you have seen the letter. Quote. Gabriel stiffened but did not deny it. I saw it. And I also saw what it means, that my father ordered the death of an innocent man. Quote. The Marchesa snapped her fan shut. Not an innocent man. An agitator. A laborer who dared to defy our authority. Your father only defended what was his. Quote. Gabriel clenched his fists. What was his were fields and olive groves. Not a man's life. Quote. The Marchesa regarded him coldly. Listen well, Gabriel, that girl, Elena, is not just a governess. She is the daughter of Julian Montoro. She came into this house with a purpose, and it was not to teach your nephews. Quote. Gabriel faced her with fury. And what did you expect? That she would kneel before us after my father left her an orphan? The Marchesa stepped closer, her shadow stretched long beneath the portrait. I expect you to remember who you are. You are a Montemayor. This name means power, land, respect. If you follow that girl, you will lose everything. Quote. Gabriel met her gaze, fire in his eyes. If keeping that name means silencing my father's injustices, then I would rather lose it all. Quote. The silence was brutal. For the first time, the Marchesa saw in her son the defiance of a man ready to break chains. You are blind, she whispered. That woman will drag you to ruin. Quote. Gabriel turned toward the door. Perhaps. But I prefer ruin to a lie. Quote. In her chamber, Elena held the letter tightly to her chest. The confrontation in the gallery had left her trembling. Now she knew the Marchesa would not stop. And when Gabriel burst into the room, his voice struck like lightning. Elena, my mother will not rest until she takes this from you. His eyes fixed gravely on the letter. I do not want to lose you, but you must decide, will you trust me, or will you fight alone? Tears shone in Elena's eyes. She was trapped between two fires, justice for her father and love for a man who bore the name of his executioner. She knew the Marchesa's next move would be merciless. Chapter 14, The Assault in the Night. The moon washed the corridors of La Arboleda in silver. All seemed calm, yet Elena felt a dark premonition. She had hidden the letter beneath the loose floorboard in her chamber, convinced it would be safe there. She did not know the Marchesa had already given the order. In the shadows of the courtyard, Rosora waited with two trusted overseers, rough men who asked no questions, only obeyed. The lady wants that paper tonight, the maid whispered, handing them the master key to the rooms. Elena woke with a start. A creak, barely a brush on the wood. The candle on her bedside flickered weakly. She sat up, cold fear piercing her, the door was opening slowly. Two shadows entered. One slammed the door shut, the other strode toward her. What are you doing here? Elena cried, retreating. Silence, girl, one of them growled. Give us what you're hiding and nothing will happen to you. Quote. Elena understood at once, they had come for the letter. Her heart pounded in her chest. She leapt toward the loose board, trying to reach it, but a brutal hand seized her arm and shoved her against the wall. Let me go. The other man ransacked the room, tearing open drawers, shaking the mattress, hurling her books to the floor. Elena struggled desperately. She remembered her father's face, his laughter beneath the sun of the fields, and knew she could not let them steal the only proof of his innocence. She bit the hand that held her and with a cry hurled herself to the floor, striking the board loose. The envelope appeared for a fleeting instant, enough for the other overseer to see. There it is, he roared, lunging. Elena clutched the paper to her chest, ready to defend it with teeth and nails. Suddenly, the door burst open. Enough, Gabriel's voice thundered. He stormed in like a hurricane, a lamp in his hand. The overseers froze, startled. Gabriel stepped between them, his shadow towering. What is the meaning of this? The men faltered. Rosora slipped in behind them, feigning innocence. Elena was hiding something, Señorito, the Señora ordered. My mother gives no orders in this room. Gabriel roared. Out, all of you. The overseers exchanged glances, hesitated, but the fire in the heir's eyes forced them back. They left muttering, Rosora trailing after them, her face distorted. Elena still trembled, kneeling on the floor, the envelope clutched in her hands. Gabriel helped her rise. Are you hurt? She looked at him, tears of rage and fear in her eyes. They tried, they were going to take it. Quote. Gabriel gripped her shoulders, his voice solemn, almost a vow. As long as I breathe, no one will ever touch you again. Quote. Elena wanted to believe him, but she knew that night had changed everything. The war against the Marquesa was no longer a game of intrigue. Now it was fought with force, with violence, and blood could spill at any moment. Chapter 15, The Marquesa's Poison. Peace in La Arboleda lasted barely a dawn. The next day, the church bells tolled for Sunday Mass, and as was custom, all the nobility of the region gathered in the main square. Elena descended holding the children's hands, trying to conceal the scars the previous night had left on her soul. She said nothing, but the sense of danger followed her like a shadow. The Marquesa, on the other hand, appeared with majestic bearing, dressed in black velvet, her fan like a scepter and her expression that of a queen summoning her subjects. She greeted landowners, merchants, and adorned ladies, all while her plan was already in motion. When the priest finished his homily, the Marquesa stepped onto the church steps, as if making an innocent announcement. Her voice rose clear and cold, like a well-honed blade. Friends, neighbors, families of this land, she said, smiling with false cordiality. Today I wish to speak of the importance of loyalty and obedience, virtues that have always upheld our society. Quote. The murmurs died away. All listened. The Marquesa moved her fan slowly, letting her words sink in. But there are those who infiltrate our homes under masks of humility, concealing surnames stained by treachery. Those who come with the intent to sow discord, to pit sons against fathers, masters against servants. Quote. Elena felt her blood freeze. She had not spoken her name, but everyone knew whom she meant. Gazes began to pierce her like thorns. The Marquesa continued, her tone firm and calculated. The Montemayors do not fear such intrigues. But we will not allow false innocence to tarnish our honor. Quote. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some ladies crossed themselves, men frowned as they turned their eyes on Elena. The children clung to her skirts, confused. Gabriel, who had stood a few steps behind, suddenly stepped forward. He climbed the church steps and faced his mother before everyone. Enough, mother, he thundered. If anyone stains this name, it is not her. Quote. For an instant, the Marquesa paled, startled by her son's audacity, but she regained composure quickly as she realized all eyes were upon them. Gabriel took Elena's hand, in a gesture both public and defiant. She has more honor in a single act than many of those who whisper here. And if anyone accuses her, they accuse me as well. Quote. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. Then a murmur of scandal swept through the square. No one could recall such a humiliation against the Marquesa Montemayor. The lady's eyes burned with contained fury. You have signed your own sentence, Gabriel, she whispered with an icy smile only he and Elena could hear. If you choose that woman, you renounce everything that belongs to you. Quote. Gabriel held his mother's gaze. I would rather lose everything than lose myself. Quote. Elena could barely breathe. The war was no longer a secret whispered in the hacienda's halls, it had been declared before the entire town. And she knew that a Marquesa wounded in public would be more dangerous than ever. Chapter 16, The Marquesa's Trap. The humiliation in the square had left the Marquesa Montemayor with a burning venom in her blood. Never, in all her years of power, had anyone dared to face her in public, much less her own son. The challenge had to be paid for. The occasion came soon. A game of cunning, a rumor skillfully planted, and the trap was set. That afternoon, while Elena reviewed the children's lessons, Rosaura burst into the sitting room, breathless. "Señorita, come quickly, there's a fire in the barn." Elena dropped the books and ran after the maid. The acrid scent of smoke drifted in the air, sharp and alarming. But as she turned down the hallway leading to the storage rooms, something felt wrong. There were no cries of alarm, no rushing servants. Only silence. Suddenly, two men emerged from the shadows, the same overseers who had tried to snatch the letter from her nights before. "The lady says the game ends here," one of them declared, blocking her path. Elena stepped back, but Rosaura closed the way behind her, locking the door. The smell of smoke grew stronger. In the corner of the storeroom, someone had set fire to the bales of hay. "You're insane," Elena cried. "The whole house will burn." "Only if you don't cooperate," the other overseer replied, advancing. "Give us the letter, and you'll walk out alive." Quote. Elena's heart thundered in her chest. The smoke was thickening, the flames growing, devouring the dry wood. The letter was hidden in her corset, pressed against her chest. If she surrendered it, she would lose her father forever. If she didn't, she would die trapped in that blaze. With fierce determination, she tore a loose iron bar from one of the beams and brandished it as an improvised weapon. "You'll have to kill me first." Quote. The men exchanged mocking looks and stepped closer. At that instant, the door burst open with a brutal crash. Gabriel stormed in, covering his mouth and nose from the smoke. "Elena." Without hesitation, he hurled himself at the overseers. The first fell with a single blow, the second grappled with him until Gabriel slammed him into the burning bales. The man fled shrieking, shielding his scorched face. Gabriel grabbed Elena by the waist, lifting her almost by force. "Quickly, before this collapses." Together they fought through the smoke, stumbling into the courtyard as the fire consumed the storeroom. Servants ran with buckets of water, but it was too late. The barn blazed like a bonfire in the night. Elena clung to Gabriel's chest, trembling, the envelope still hidden against her skin. He looked at her, his face blackened with soot, his eyes blazing with fury. "This was no accident," he muttered through clenched teeth. "My mother meant to kill you." Quote. Elena knew it in the depths of her soul. The war had crossed its final line. This was no longer about intrigue or rumor. The Marquesa had unleashed open violence, and every moment could be the last. On the balcony of the main house, the Marquesa watched the fire from a distance, her fan motionless in her hands. A cold smile curved her lips. "This time you escaped, little girl," she whispered to herself. "But there will not be a next time." Quote. Chapter 17, The Ultimatum. The house of La Arboleda still smelled of smoke. The embers of the barn smoldered under the servants' watch, and the rumor of the fire had already spread throughout the valley. Some claimed it was an accident, others whispered it was an omen of misfortune. Gabriel did not wait for explanations. He strode up the steps of the gallery, fury in his stride, and entered the main drawing room, where the Marquesa awaited him seated in her velvet armchair, her fan motionless, her expression serene, as though she had already calculated everything. "So, you come to accuse me," she said, without raising her voice. Gabriel pointed at her in anger. "Don't take me for a fool, mother. The fire was no accident. You sent your men to find the letter, and they nearly killed her." Quote. The Marquesa narrowed her eyes. "Whether that girl lived or died matters little to me. What matters is saving this name from the ruin she herself will bring with her hands." Quote. Gabriel advanced until he stood directly before her, his breathing harsh. "It is you who are destroying this family. Your pride, your thirst for power, that ruins us more than any piece of paper." Quote. The Marquesa looked at him with coldness, as if she were gazing at a stranger. "Are you truly willing to sacrifice all that you are for that governess?" "She is not a governess," Gabriel roared. "She is a woman who deserves justice. And I love her." Quote. The fan snapped shut. The Marquesa rose, towering, the shadow of Don Rodrigo's portrait looming behind her. "Then listen well, Gabriel. if you choose that woman, you renounce La Arboleda, the lands, the Montemayor name. Everything your father built will be beyond your reach. Quote. The silence weighed heavy as lead. Gabriel did not blink. Keep your lands, mother. Keep your wealth and your hollow pride. I would rather walk free at Elena's side, even if I have nothing. Quote. The Marquesa blanched, as though struck across the face. The blow was not against her estate, but against her power over him. Yet she recovered with a chilling smile. Very well, my son. You have chosen. And I shall choose as well. Quote. Gabriel held her gaze. What do you mean by that? It means, the Marquesa replied, her tone low and venomous, that if she remains in this house, she will be like a thorn in my flesh. And I do not tolerate thorns. Quote. That night, Elena waited in the stable, still shaken by the fire. Gabriel found her there, his clothes still smudged with soot, but his eyes steady with resolve. I have broken with my mother, he told her, taking her hands. If I stay here, she will strip me of everything, but with you, I am not afraid of losing it. Quote. Elena looked at him, trembling. The intensity of his words wrapped around her, but the Marquesa's threat hung above her like a dagger in the air. And if she tries again to destroy me? She asked softly. Gabriel drew her into his chest. Then she will have to pass over my dead body. Quote. Elena closed her eyes, and for an instant allowed herself to rest in his arms. But deep inside, she knew the Marquesa would not stop. The true battle had only just begun. Chapter 18, The Trial of Appearances. In the days following the fire, rumors in the village spread like wildfire. No one spoke of anything else, the barn reduced to ashes, the rebellious son defying his mother, and the governess turned into the apple of discord. The Marquesa wasted no time. She gathered in her drawing rooms the most influential men of the region, the magistrate, the parish priest, and a pair of allied landowners. With a soft, almost pious voice, she told them her version of events. That young woman, she said, her expression wounded, came into my house with lies. She has seduced my son, confused my grandchildren, and now, I fear, has even endangered the safety of the estate. Quote. The priest frowned. What danger do you speak of, madam? The Marquesa let her silence weigh before delivering the dagger. I am afraid we found her lingering near the fire. Some of the servants claim they saw her enter just before the flames began. Quote. Whispers broke out. The magistrate clasped his hands on the table. Are you suggesting the governess set the fire? The Marquesa leaned forward with a mournful air. I do not wish to think so ill, but what other explanation is there? Since her arrival, she has brought nothing but misfortune. And now, this disaster. Quote. The priest sighed. A woman who inflames improper passions and divides a family is a danger to Christian morals. Quote. The trap was set. The next day, Elena was summoned to the magistrate's office. When she entered, she found the priest, several townsmen, and, in the front row, the Marquesa, her fan closed like an invisible weapon. Señorita de la Fuente, began the magistrate in a severe tone, word has spread that you were present at the barn fire. What have you to say in your defense? Elena turned pale. She looked around, feeling the stares pierce her like blades. That is a lie, she exclaimed. Others broke in. I was the victim, not the culprit. Quote. The priest raised a brow. Do you have witnesses to confirm this? Elena opened her mouth, then stopped. Gabriel knew the truth, of course, but if she called him, it would pit him against his own mother before the entire county. The scandal would be irreparable. The Marquesa seized the silence to smile with false compassion. Poor child, she tangles herself in her own words. Quote. A murmur rippled through the room. Some men nodded, already convinced. Elena felt the trap closing around her. They did not only want to seize the letter, they wanted her honor, her reputation, even her right to remain at La Arboleda. Suddenly, a firm voice rang out. Enough of these slanders. Gabriel burst in, defying every rule of decorum. His tall figure filled the office, and his words cracked like a whip. I was the witness. Those men entered to kill her, and had I not arrived in time, today we would be mourning her corpse. Quote. The silence was brutal. No one dared contradict him. The Marquesa glared at him with fire in her eyes, but her son held her gaze without wavering. Be warned, mother. If you continue your attacks on Elena, I will be the one to bring into the light everything this name conceals. Quote. The magistrate and the priest exchanged uneasy looks. No one wished for a scandal that would tarnish the Montemayor name. The session was dismissed without resolution, but the venom had already been sown. Elena knew it. The Marquesa had lost the battle, but not the war. That night, in the silence of her chamber, Elena looked once more at the letter. For the first time, she asked herself if it was time to use it. If it was time to shout to the world that the Montemayor's hands were stained with blood. Chapter 19, The Letter and the Heart. Night fell over La Arboleda with an uncanny stillness, as though even the wind held its breath. In her chamber, Elena lit a single candle and placed the letter upon the table. The yellowed paper glowed as if it were aflame. She had read it so many times she could recite every word, the signature of Don Rodrigo Montemayor, the order to eliminate Julian Montoro, her father. It was proof, undeniable truth. And yet, it was also the weapon that could destroy the man she loved. She covered her face with her hands, suffocated by doubt. Father, what would you do in my place? She whispered. Tears ran down her cheeks. Was it justice she sought, or vengeance? A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Gabriel entered slowly, his face weary but his gaze unwavering. You cannot sleep, he said in a low voice. Elena shook her head. How could I? This letter is my only weapon, and my curse. Quote. Gabriel stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Listen to me. If you use it, you will destroy the Montemayor name. And with it, all that I am. I do not ask you to burn it, nor to forget your father. I ask only, that you do not lose me. Quote. Elena looked at him, her heart torn in two. And if I remain silent? What would my father's memory say of me? What kind of daughter would I be if I hid the truth? The silence between them was so dense it seemed another wall. Gabriel caressed her tenderly. You would be a daughter who chose life over blood. Quote. Elena trembled. Their lips brushed lightly, a kiss restrained by the weight of guilt. She turned her face away, stifled. I cannot decide, Gabriel. Each path tears a piece of my soul away. Quote. He drew her into his arms, as though he could shield her from her own fate. Then decide with me. Not alone. Quote. At that moment, a noise in the corridor broke the fragile calm. Quick footsteps, muffled whispers. Gabriel rose at once and threw the door open. Rosora, the maid, staggered as she was caught with her ear pressed to the wood. You, Gabriel roared, seizing her arm. What were you listening to? The girl trembled like a leaf. The lady ordered me to keep watch. Elena turned pale. The Marquesa already knew the letter still existed. With trembling hands, Elena sealed the envelope. She knew she could not hide it much longer. If she did not make her choice soon, it would be the Marquesa who chose for her. Chapter 20, The Theft. Dawn arrived with a strange air, heavy with tension. Elena had not slept. The letter lay beneath her pillow, like a talisman and a dagger at once. When she went down to the dining room, she noticed something unusual in the routine. Rosora was nowhere to be seen. The silence in the corridors was thicker than usual. The Marquesa appeared soon after, serene, flawless as always. Did you sleep well, señorita? She asked with an icy smile. A chill ran down Elena's spine, but she did not reply. Hours later, when she returned to her room, horror struck her like lightning. The pillow was torn apart, the sheets disheveled, the floorboard lifted. The letter was gone. Elena collapsed to her knees, frantically searching every corner, every trunk, every book. Nothing. Suddenly, the door opened. The Marquesa entered calmly, holding the envelope between two fingers, as if it were a trophy. Are you looking for this? She asked softly. Elena leapt to her feet, eyes blazing. Give it back. The Marquesa smiled. No, my dear. This letter no longer belongs to you. In truth, it never did. It is nothing but a piece of paper, until someone turns it into a weapon. And I will not allow you to destroy my family with it. Quote. Elena stepped forward, ready to snatch it, but the Marquesa raised her hand. Dare it, and by tomorrow the entire valley will know that a poor governess invented evidence to blackmail the Montemayors. No one will believe you, do you understand? No one. Quote. The silence was unbearable. Elena felt despair biting into her chest. That letter is the truth. You cannot bury it. The Marquesa tilted her head coldly. The truth is whatever the powerful say it is. And you are nobody. Quote. At that moment, Gabriel burst into the room. He froze at the sight of his mother holding the envelope. Mother. Elena rushed to him. She took it. The Marquesa looked at him, defiant. Your father wrote these words, Gabriel. And if they come to light, they will stain not only his name, but yours. Do you wish to live under the weight of being the son of the murderer? Gabriel stood frozen. The dagger had struck deep. It was no longer only about protecting Elena, but protecting himself. The Marquesa saw his hesitation and smiled in triumph. Choose, my son. Your name, or that woman. Quote. Elena looked at him, tears shining in her eyes. Gabriel clenched his fists, torn apart by the dilemma. And he knew that whatever word he spoke would forever change the fate of them all. Chapter 21, Fire and Blood. The main hall lay in shadows, lit only by the fireplace. The Marquesa held the letter in her hands like a scepter of power. Gabriel and Elena faced her, their hearts pounding. Today everything is decided, the Marquesa said coldly. This letter will never see the light of day. Quote. She made a motion to throw it into the fire. Elena cried out and lunged forward, but Gabriel caught her by the arm. Mother, don't do it, he roared. The Marquesa looked at him with a glint of triumph. Why not? Do you want everyone to know you are the son of a murderer? Do you want your name dragged through the mud? Elena struggled to free herself. It isn't your name that matters, it's the truth. Gabriel let her go abruptly. He watched her run to the fireplace and seize the Marquesa's wrist with unexpected strength. The envelope trembled between their fingers. Give me back my father, Elena cried, tears falling onto the paper. The two women wrestled at the edge of the fire. One more instant and the envelope would fall into the flames. Gabriel hurled himself between them, seizing both their hands. Enough, he roared. This ends today. The silence thickened, broken only by the crackle of burning wood. Gabriel tore the letter away and held it high, breath ragged. His eyes moved between the two halves of his life, his mother, cold as ice, Elena, trembling yet unyielding, her soul blazing in her eyes. If I burn this letter, he said hoarsely, I bury the truth with it. If I keep it, I condemn the Montemayors forever. What do you want from me? That I choose between you as if you were enemies instead of family? Elena stepped forward, her voice breaking. I don't want your name, Gabriel. I only want my father to rest in peace. Quote. The Marquesa stared at him with icy hardness. And I want you to remember who you are. A Montemayor. Not a traitor. Quote. Gabriel closed his eyes, the envelope trembling in his hands. Then he opened them, and in them shone a fierce resolve. Then I choose to be free. Quote. With a swift motion, he broke the seal and spread the letter before them both. The words of Don Rodrigo lay exposed, bare, undeniable. The truth will not burn in the fire, he said firmly. The truth will be known, even if it costs me everything. Quote. Elena sobbed with relief. The Marquesa paled, staggering as though the air had been torn from her lungs. You fool, she spat, her voice trembling with fury. You have condemned your own blood. Gabriel did not answer. He handed the letter to Elena, who clutched it to her chest as if it were the relic of a martyr. At that instant, the hacienda's bell rang out urgently. Shouts and footsteps echoed in the courtyard. A servant burst into the hall, gasping. Señorito, señora, the laborers from the valley, they are coming armed toward the house. The silence shattered like glass. The letter was no longer a secret. The storm had begun. Chapter 22, The Assault of the People. The roar of the crowd came first, like distant thunder. Then the shouts grew clear, insults, cries for justice, the clatter of tools turned into makeshift weapons. When Gabriel stepped onto the balcony, he saw the scene. Dozens of laborers and peasants from the valley had gathered before the gates of the hacienda. They carried torches, shovels, hoes, and old muskets inherited from the war. Their faces blazed with fury. "Murderers!" shouted a man with a scruffy beard. "Damn Montemayor, your father killed ours." "Justice!" others cried. "Let the whole family pay." Elena appeared at his side, pale, the letter still in her hands. She didn't need to ask how they had found out. A rumor was enough, a spy, a servant loyal to the Marquesa who had betrayed the existence of the document. The truth was no longer a secret, it spread freely like fire on the wind. Gabriel raised his hands, trying to rise above the noise. "Listen to me, my father committed a crime, yes. But I am not him." The jeers drowned him out. Some men pounded on the gates with axes, others lifted torches toward the windows. The fury of the crowd was one step away from turning into lynching. The Marquesa entered the hall like a fallen empress, still dangerous. "Kill them," she hissed in her son's ear. "Order the guards to fire, or they will tear this hacienda apart." Gabriel shoved her aside violently. "There will be no more blood." Elena stepped forward, the envelope pressed to her chest. The crowd recognized her, and the shouts doubled. "She's the daughter of the dead man," cried a woman. "Let her speak." Elena felt the earth open beneath her feet. It was the moment she had dreaded. She drew a deep breath and raised the letter high. "Yes, my father was murdered by order of Don Rodrigo Montemayor. Here is his signature, here is his sentence." Quote. A shiver ran through the crowd. Many wept with pent-up rage. Others raised their torches, clamoring for vengeance. Elena went on, her voice firm though her throat burned. "But it is not Gabriel who must pay. He did not stain his hands with blood. If you seek vengeance, you seek it from me, and from his mother, who guarded this secret." Quote. The eyes of the crowd turned to the Marquesa. For the first time in her life, the woman who had ruled with an iron fist felt cornered. "Look at her," shouted a laborer. She knew. She kept silent. A chorus of voices rose, calling for her head. Gabriel stepped forward, shielding his mother. "No one else will die tonight." But the crowd surged forward, smashing the hacienda's gates in a brutal crash. Torches rose in the corridors, shouts multiplied. La Arboleda stood at the brink of becoming an inferno. Elena seized Gabriel's hand. "If we don't act now, blood will cover these lands forever." Quote. And in that instant, she understood that the fate of them all hung on her decision. The letter was no longer a hidden weapon, it had become the spark of a revolution. Chapter 23, The Fall of La Arboleda. The roar of the crowd shook the walls like ceaseless thunder. The gate was already shattered, and dozens of men poured into the courtyards with torches and shovels, like an army risen from the earth. The Montemayor hacienda, proud for generations, burned from all four corners. Servants fled in terror, some joined the rebels, others tried to save what little they could. Smoke covered the sky in crimson. In the main hall, the Marquesa descended the staircase with a dignity that defied catastrophe. Her black gown seemed to absorb the flames that lit her figure. She stood firm before the mob storming the entryway, and with a voice that cut through the chaos, she cried. "Cowards! That is what you are, cowards! You come armed against a woman. My husband was a great man, a true lord, and you are nothing but beasts who forget who fed you." The men roared, hurling stones and curses. A torch flew through the air and struck a tapestry, which went up in flames at once. Gabriel appeared beside Elena, his face smeared with soot, his father's sword in hand. "Mother, enough. This isn't bravery, it's suicide." The Marquesa looked at him with fury, but also with twisted pride. "If I fall, I will fall as a Montemayor, facing my enemies." Quote. The crowd thundered. "Justice," some shouted. "Blood," cried others. Then, a voice rose clear above all. "Let the dead man's daughter speak." Elena felt every eye fixed on her. Her heart beat like a war drum, but she stepped forward, raising the letter high. "Here is the proof," she cried, her voice slicing through the uproar. "Yes, Don Rodrigo Montemayor ordered the murder of Julian Montoro, my father." A roar of fury swept through the peasants. Some lunged toward the Marquesa. Elena flung her arms wide to stop them. "But it is not with more blood that you will honor the dead. If you kill today, tomorrow you will be no different from him." The silence was brutal. Flames crackled around her, illuminating her serene face, steady in the heart of disaster. The Marquesa laughed, a broken, hollow sound. "Innocent fool, do you truly believe your words can quench their thirst for vengeance?" She stepped forward and, with a sudden snatch, tore the letter from Elena's hands. "You want proof? Here it is," she shouted, raising the paper to the flames. The crowd held its breath. Gabriel lunged toward her. "No." The fire licked the edges of the document. Elena screamed, but it was too late. The ink began to curl into ashes. The truth was burning. The past was being erased before their eyes. In that instant, an enraged peasant hurled a knife that whistled through the air. Gabriel threw himself in its path, and the blade sank into his shoulder. Chaos exploded. The mob surged, torches flew, glass shattered across the floor. Elena caught Gabriel as blood stained his shirt. "Hold on, for God's sake, hold on." Suddenly, above the uproar, a sharp cry pierced the air. Children's voices, upstairs. Elena's heart clenched. Her pupils, the youngest Montemayors, were trapped. Without hesitation, she laid Gabriel carefully on the ground. "Don't move, I'll come back for you." The smoke struck her as she climbed the stairs, but instinct, the instinct of a governess, was stronger than fear. She ran to the nursery, where the children clung together, weeping beside their nursemaid, frozen with terror. "Quickly," Elena ordered firmly. "Cover your faces." She grabbed a blanket, soaked it with water from a jug, and wrapped it around the little ones. With a steady voice, she led them through smoke and flames, down a side passage that led to the stables. When they reached the courtyard, she found Tomas, the old laborer. "Take them," she cried, thrusting the children into his arms. "Get them out of here, protect them as if they were your own." The man nodded, tears in his eyes, and guided them toward the exit through the crowd. Only then, breathless and covered in soot, did Elena rush back into the hall for Gabriel. She found him still on the ground, his sword fallen at his side, his eyes half closed. The Marquesa, meanwhile, stood tall before the mob, defiant, encircled by flames closing in on her. "So ends la arboleda," she whispered, just before a burning beam crashed down, burying her in fire. Elena hauled Gabriel up as best she could, dragging him toward the rear of the hacienda. The fire consumed everything, and behind them echoed the cries of the people and the collapse of centuries of power. Out in the dark, open fields, at last she breathed clean air. Gabriel, wounded, rested his forehead on her shoulder. "With you, though all burns, I am still free." Quote. Elena held him tightly, whispering, "As long as I breathe, I will not let you die." Quote. And behind them, La Arboleda crumbled in its own inferno, lighting the sky like a cursed sun. Chapter 24: The Escape. The crash of falling beams split the air like thunder. La Arboleda was ablaze, transformed into a pyre that devoured the very memory of the Montemayors. Elena dragged Gabriel, who bled in torrents from the wound in his shoulder. The heat of the fire wrapped around them, the smoke biting at their throats. "Hold on, please, hold on," she pleaded, tears and soot streaking down her face. Gabriel could barely speak, yet he gripped her hand with all his strength. "Don't leave me." "Never," Elena answered, with both fury and tenderness, supporting him with all the strength in her body. All around them, the town was a sea of chaos. Some peasants still hurled torches at balconies, others plundered what remained, as if they wished to rip even the last breath from the cursed house. Amid the tumult, Elena spotted Tomas in the distance, leading the Montemayor children through the crowd. Wrapped in blankets, frightened but alive, they followed the old laborer at a hurried pace. When he saw her, Tomas raised a hand to show that the little ones were safe. Elena's heart clenched with relief. She had done it. Her pupils were out of the inferno. The marchioness, however, did not flee. Standing upon the main staircase, her black gown lit by the flames, she was the very image of a proud spectre. "Look well," she cried, her voice resounding through smoke and shouts. "Today La Arboleda dies, but not I. I am a Montemayor to the last flame, to the last breath." A group of peasants surged toward her, but they had no time to reach her. A burning beam crashed from above, engulfing the marchioness in a wall of fire. Her silhouette rose for an instant, rigid, defiant, then vanished into the blaze. The crowd drew back in silence. No one cheered. No one shouted. The marchioness's pride had chosen its own end. There was no more time. Elena hauled Gabriel onto her shoulder as best she could and dragged him toward the rear of the estate. Amid the smoke, she found a passage through the stables that still resisted the flames. Staggering forward, they finally emerged into the open fields. The fresh air struck their lungs, and the dark sky was beginning to lighten with the first glimmers of dawn. Both collapsed to their knees on the damp grass. Elena cupped Gabriel's face in her hands, terrified by the pallor spreading across it. "Hold on. I won't let you go, do you hear me? I won't lose you too." He tried to smile, faintly. "With you, even in ruin? I am free." Quote. Elena kissed him desperately, pressing her breath into his, as if she could return his strength. Behind them, La Arboleda crumbled into its own pyre. The Montemayor lineage was consumed forever. Chapter 25. Among Ashes and Dawns. Smoke still veiled the valley when dawn broke. Where once La Arboleda had stood, there remained only smoldering ruins, charred beams, and blackened walls that creaked like broken bones. The air smelled of ash and mourning. Elena walked barefoot across the damp grass, holding the hand of Gabriel, who lay bandaged upon a makeshift cot beneath a shed. His eyes were closed, his face pale, yet his breathing remained steady. Each time she looked at him, Elena felt a knot of fear and hope. He had survived the wound, but his body still clung to life by a thread. At midday, the villagers gathered in the clearing before the ruins. Laborers, women, children, and elders, all their faces marked by fatigue and the anger that still smoldered in their chests. The young Montemayors were there too, trembling beneath blankets, under the care of Tomas and other women of the town. Their frightened gazes were the image of innocence trapped between vengeance and fire. Elena stepped forward with firm stride. Her dress was torn, her hair loose, but her gaze shone with the strength of one who no longer feared. "Today the Montemayor house has fallen," she said, her voice clear above the murmur. Its arrogance and its pride burned with its walls. Quote. There were nods, murmurs. "But not everything must burn," she went on, her eyes upon the children. "They are not guilty of their father's sins, nor of their mother's pride. If today we answer with more blood, what future will remain for them? A valley of ashes?" Silence spread. Among the crowd, Tomas, the old laborer, raised his voice. "She speaks true. We have seen too much death already. What example do we give our children if we answer crime with more crime?" The men lowered their gaze. The women nodded. The children clung to the skirts of their caretakers, seeking shelter in those words. Elena stepped forward once more. "My father's truth was not lost. Though the letter burned, all here know what happened. And I tell you this, I will never again be silent. But I also know Gabriel was not guilty. He chose truth, even against his own blood." Quote. Many eyes turned toward Gabriel, lying weak upon his cot, his face bathed in sunlight breaking through the mist. A different murmur rippled through the crowd, lower, gentler. It was not fury, it was doubt, it was compassion. The voice of a young woman broke the silence. "Perhaps it is time to let the old Montemayors die, and let the new ones live." Quote. Elena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. That night, when at last they were alone, she sat beside Gabriel and caressed his face tenderly. "We have nothing left," she whispered. "No land, no gold, no house." Quote. Gabriel opened his eyes with effort and smiled faintly. "We still have the only thing that matters. You and I." Quote. Elena rested her forehead against his. Beyond them, among the ruins of La Arboleda, a single ember still glowed, like a promise. It was the end of an era. It was the beginning of another. Aquí tienes la traducción al inglés del epílogo, manteniendo la fuerza lírica y la cadencia poética. Epilogue, Ashes and Memory. The valley was never the same after that night. Where La Arboleda once stood, only smoldering ruins remained, consumed by silence and time. When the wind brushed against the blackened stones, it seemed to carry the voices of those who had perished there. But from the ashes, something new was born. The Montemayor children, saved from the fire, grew far from the weight of their surname. No one blamed them again for the sins of their elders. The village, which at first had cried for vengeance, came to protect them as proof that innocence should not perish alongside resentment. Elena remained their guide, not as a governess, but as the mother of a new horizon. Her teaching was no longer confined to letters and books, but to memory. Truth must not be forgotten, yet neither should it be repeated with more blood. They say that, with the years, grass covered the rubble of La Arboleda, and birdsong replaced the crackling of the flames. And that each dawn, when the golden light kissed the olive groves, people remembered the woman who chose to save, even when the easier path would have been to destroy. For in the end, it was not the fire that gave birth to a new era, but the decision of a woman who knew how to look beyond hatred. And so, from ashes, a different dawn arose. Thank you for accompanying me through this beautiful story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did sharing it with you. If you liked it, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel Whispers by Mega Audiobooks so you won't miss any of my upcoming releases.